Hey guys, Grassman here, playing more Minor Gun Builder, and today we are continuing to farm in the worlds, and we're going to talk about quantum physics, because that's fun. Here we are agreed. Now let's see if Sub to Grassman lined himself up. Show all. Have they progressed? They're still only at 5402. I got another record on speedrun.com. I got a 49-second Spearton level on normal. 1718. So we are... Yeah! We did it! Woo! Perfect! We got it! We got it, boys! That's the thumbnail. I'm gonna take a screenshot of that preemptively. Thank you. Perfect. No comment. No, perfect. Well done. I should probably change my name back. We got it, boys. Wait, didn't it not accept this? No, it did accept Grassman. Yeah. There was some other game that didn't accept the grass. Okay, so we're just farming like normal again. As always, we'll try and pick up as many like squares as possible on the way. And today we're talking about quantum physics. Actually, I'm gonna be right back. Hang on. Okay. Maybe I just go clear my nose and throat before we start talking. If you go back and like watch some of my old videos, you find like a lot of them just had like constant like loud breathing or like sniffling in them, and I realized like gotta be more careful. There was one comment that told me like, love your videos, hate that you like chew and you just sniffle and stuff in your videos, and I realized yeah, I should probably stop that. So tried to be a little bit more careful of that. I do realize sometimes still like the microphone is very sensitive, and I don't know how to fix that. So sometimes I'll open my mouth and to start speaking, and then there's just like and there's that little like sound that comes out, and I noticed that in the videos, and I'm like, what? Shouldn't it not pick that up really? Because like when you just open your mouth, some of those sounds get made, but maybe I just have to be more careful opening my mouth, not to like rub my lips together or to avoid that stuff. Anyway, quantum physics. What are the quantum physics of me opening my mouth? So quantum physics. Where did we pick up last time? Depends on the nature of the universe. So our events like set. Will certain things happen? So one of the big things is like, will things happen no matter what, or is it like the butterfly effect, or is it not the butterfly effect where some small thing can affect big things, but small things will affect small things? Or like small things might affect small things within their area, but they won't necessarily affect other things. So me like going back in the past and just blowing on something won't cause a storm on the other side of the world, but it will change the atmospheric wind patterns to cause a windstorm another day. And, or, you know, will it down the future cause a butterfly effect? Or will it change things completely? If you went back to, I don't know, the near negative 1000s, you're 2000, you're almost 3000 years before World War II. Could you doing something, moving a rock, or talking to a person stop World War II? Would you have that big of changes, or are those kind of things going to happen anyway? Which kind of ties into, like, what kind of lasting impact do people have? Because nowadays, like, I could easily go back in time and, like, convince Jacksepticeye, like, if I could go back in time, convince Jacksepticeye to not do YouTube or something, you know, that one little difference is going to affect so many people, because he has millions of people in his audience. He's helped so many people, he's changed so many people's lives. I would easily be able to use that to cause so many changes in the future, from whatever the future is going to be for now. Even like within these past 10 years, it could cause smallish changes. Maybe it wouldn't cause giant changes, but with all the changes, with how spread out he is, he's like a center point or he's like a center point. There's a lot of center points in like the giant web of connected things. So bouncing on that point, even though compared to some other things it's still small, would have massive reverberating effects, whereas bouncing on the corner might take a long time to reverberate out. That's all assuming the butterfly effect is true, though. There's other possibilities where, instead of like a butterfly effect, and where things are more... You kind of have to like think of it in the future, too. Are there things in the future that are set to happen? Are there things in the future, like a Third World War, that will happen at a specific time, or around a certain time, and even if you change a lot of things, there's going to be some sort of war between some sort of massive powers or something. And not just like because we haven't had a war like that yet, but a specific event or something that's going to cause it. A specific, the Holocaust, the specific thing about World War II was the Holocaust, and like the Germans taking over Europe. Will a specific thing, even if it changes a little bit, maybe if the Nazis beat Britain or they get to America, will it be that same sort of war with like a Holocaust? Is that sort of thing a locked event that has to happen? And it's also interesting to... The other interesting thing is this kind of stuff predictable? If you could take everything in the universe and you put it through a black box. A black box kind of has like two meanings. One meaning is it's a thing that's meant to survive like a plane crash or a space crash. So if something falls out of space, a satellite falls out of space, the black box is the thing that records the flight information for what the hell happened and why did this thing fall out of space. So you can recover the black box and figure it out. Same with a plane, it'll tell you why a plane fell out of the sky. And the black box is meant to be the at least one thing that survives the crash. If anything survives, it's a black box. It is made to be absolutely, completely durable, and it stores the flight information. So you can recover it if anything happened. The other thing a black box is, it's a coding term or a problem term for it's basically a term for let's magically say it works. We say we magically have this thing, it's in the black box, it just happens. So you like say, let's say our program can magically do this, how do we do this? That would be the programming use for it. For a problem solving thing, or for an example maybe, you'd say, we have our black box that can do this thing, now what if this? So it's basically the magical thing that just does it. Whatever you need for the setup goes in the black box, and then you just can present your problem. You say the black box just is, it can just happen. So if we said our black box is a machine that we can feed information and it can perfectly predict what the future outcomes of things are. So if we fed it all the universal information, all the data from our world, could it perfectly predict what things would be like in the future? There's a couple problems with that. First off, if you could, that machine would need to contain more space than things we have in our universe. And that also means it would never be able to calculate itself. Because the machine would basically have to be at least the same size as our universe, or sort of, maybe it could probably squeeze things down somewhat. It wouldn't have to be the same size, it would have to be able to store the same amount of information. And it could, again, squeeze things down a bit. But it would never be able to calculate its own things. Because if it knew everything, including what's inside of itself, it would have to know it's doing its own calculations, and perfectly what the calculations would come out to. It's not like something I can prove definitely, because that's kind of impossible. But it would, just thinking about it logically, it would have to be able to not only think about everything outside, but also everything inside, which now doubles the space it needs. So now it needs enough space to think about everything outside and everything inside. So it needs an extra doubled space, but now it needs enough space to think about that as well. So it would constantly have to double its space, and that would end up being impossible. It would need infinite space. And then even then, it would need infinite space to calculate the previous infinity of information, and then it would need double that infinite space to ever be able to calculate anything more. It's like, technically infinity over infinity is undefined, but if it's infinity, if those infinities equal the same thing, it's 1. Infinity over infinity is undefined, but if it's if infinity equals n, and the other infinity also equals n, well then it's n over n, that's 1. If it's the same infinity, it's still equal to 1. And there might be some mathematical debate or whatever on that, but I don't even remember how I started talking about that. But you can never really have a machine that would be able to perfectly calculate anything, unless it was not trying to calculate what's inside, which would mean it would not be able to interfere with what's outside, which leads us to the interesting case of, you could in theory make a machine, and you would have to isolate it, so it could in no way affect the outside. You could make a machine that could perfectly know what's happening outside and what will happen outside, but it will never be able to tell that information to outside without changing it. Same thing with time travel. If time travel, you knew exactly what, or theoretically, of course, if you knew exactly what was going to happen, if as soon as you go back to interfere, if you go back in time to interfere, now suddenly it can change, because now there's new information and that couldn't have been calculated. So the new information will change it. So there's no way of giving that information, there's no way we could give the information to the past and have it stay consistent without it changing. Just like we couldn't predict the future without it changing. Or we couldn't predict and know the future. We could predict it, but we wouldn't be able to know it. And we can't... We can make a machine that could predict it, but only the machine would ever know. We could never actually know unless we were inside the machine. And then to know what will happen to ourselves in the future is impossible. We can't know what will happen to ourselves, we can only know what would happen to another system, or another body. But that body cannot know what will happen to itself. Only a separated, isolated object could know what would happen. So we could maybe predict what would happen to... We could predict with a machine like that what could happen to another solar system up until light speed of when our light hits there, because now things have changed. Now something's interfering with it. But assuming we knew all the parameters from where we're calculating in like a circular region of like the same, like from the radius of where we're calculating to our thing, in the same radius all the way around in a 3D sphere, we knew every parameter, we could in theory calculate all of that, and we would only be unable to calculate once our machine calculating it, had its light speed effect there. Then we can't calculate it anymore, unless we isolate the machine, in which case we would never be able to know the results. So the machine could have picked perfectly, and we could then look at it in 50 years and say, yeah, I got the last 50 years right, but we never would have been able to know that. So we can't know our own future, or anything of the future we touch. We could look at something else's future, though. We could look at what a star, if we know a star is 50 light years away, we know it's 50 years ahead of us. We could take that information if we have a machine like that, and determine what it looks like modern day to itself, 50 years later. But we wouldn't be able to... We couldn't tell that star... Well, first off, it's already gone through that, but we couldn't communicate to it that time without changing it. The other problem is, could this machine exist in the first place? So if you know stuff about quantum physics, you know there's a lot of randomness involved. So I believe there's 3 main things, at least, that act based on randomness, or some sort of changing variable that can't be properly predicted. So the first one is light. If you've heard about the double slit experiment, you know light that's monitored acts like a particle. If it's not, it acts like a wave. So, if it's acting like a wave... So, to perfectly know what it is, we would have to measure it. That means it's acting like a particle. So it's acting in a defined way, but if we're not measuring it, it acts like a wave. So, by the act of measuring it, we change how it reacts. So, could you actually measure it and still figure out what's going to happen to it? Maybe, if you could measure everything and figure out how it acts. Another thing is the rotation of quarks. If you look at a quark, we know this from like Schrödinger stuff, it will, only until you observe a quark, it's in a hyperstate. It is simultaneously in every state until you observe it. Meaning again, if we observed every quark and found all of their spins, then you could have this black box machine maybe calculate it all. But it still means that there is that randomness. Until you actually look at what it is, it could be anything. And that's possibly how free will comes about. Until we actually need to make a decision, both decisions are made. The quarks just allow us to have that free will to do whatever. I can move my arm up and down right now, or side to side, and I can choose how I'm doing that. It's not some preset thing. It's not going to happen one way or another, unless those quarks really have chosen a decision preemptively, we just can't know it. And if everything is defined like that, again, the thing about that is it doesn't actually break free will, because we could never know that. As soon as... This is why it came before was important. As soon as you introduce the new information, everything changes. As soon as you introduce the information of, yeah, we know what all the spins of the quarks are, we know what's going to happen to you and it will happen no matter what, that's new information. Now everything's screwed up. New information's come in, and that new information, even if you calculated what your information coming in would do, it would just forever keep changing as the new information keeps interfering. As soon as you would be told that things are not predetermined, and that you know what's going to happen, as soon as you were told you'll move your arm up and down, you move it side to side. It's new information, it completely ruins it. You could say, I know what you're going to do next, move your arm up or down or side to side, and they move up and down and you can show them, yeah, I knew you were going to do that, but you wouldn't be able to, because you've not actually told them what's happening. But if you told them you're going to move your arm up and down, I can just move it side to side. The new information ruins it. So there is still, even if free will is not true, there is always the illusion of free will, and it can never be broken. Because as soon as the illusion is broken, a new free will is generated. As soon as the illusion is broken, it's now no longer consistent, and the variable will change. So now there's a new illusion of free will. So even if, like some people might panic that, like, I'm not actually free, I'm not able to choose my own decisions, but even if you can't, there's always the illusion. And you would never be able to know truly whether or not you can't. And even if you did find out, it wouldn't matter, because there's just a new illusion again. And the final thing that is probably like the biggest stick of, is the universe, could we actually make a black box that could perfectly calculate something even if it's not interfering? Could we make the non-interfering black box to calculate what we would do even if we couldn't know? Is that electrons are randomness based, I think. Again, I'm not a professional, and everything I say, especially since this is the internet, as we all know, take everything on the internet with a grain of salt, but I'm also, again, not a professional. Electrons are not in a specific spot. We can't pinpoint one until we look for it. It's, again, one of those things where we can estimate where an electron will be with okay certainty. So we know around an atom, there is the highest chance of it being in this area, a lower chance of it being in this area, a very low chance of it being in this area, some medium chance of it being here. But until we actually properly, completely look for it, we can't tell where it is. If we haven't looked for the electron perfectly, we don't know where it is. We know it's in this general vicinity, and we know where it's most likely to be, but we can't tell you perfectly where it is until we actually look for it completely. At which point, well, we've seen where it is. So again, if you looked at every electron perfectly, maybe you could create this black box thing. But because they're all randomness based, an electron, until you look at it, is undefined in its location, that could be another thing that, like, ties into that, how do we have free will? If that's how the brain works, if our free will comes from electrons randomly choosing their place, and just certain arrangements of that are how we generate free will and the ability to think for ourselves, then it might be impossible to create a black box type thing like this, where it could calculate the universe. But if you could look at everything, if you could tell where every electron is, then maybe you could. Another interesting theory is, what if things could be different from different perspectives of, like, conscious life? What if, so, like, for example, if I look at, if I have my sister look at an electron, if my sister looks at an electron, or a quark or whatever, and determines its spin, she knows the spin is one way. If she does not tell me what the spin is, as far as I'm concerned, that spin is still completely random. I have absolutely no way of determining the spin. No one else has any way of determining the spin. She's not told anyone. She knows it, but no one else does. For the rest of us, is the spin still random? And that would be, like, the branching, like, universe theory. So, could I look at it and see a different random spin, but then in my universe, she saw that same spin? Or will I always see the same spin she saw? We could never know. Because in the universe where I saw that spin, she says, yeah, that's the spin I saw. In the universe where I saw her spin, she says, yeah, that's the spin I saw. It's always the same spin, but she might have actually seen in her universe a different spin than what I saw. So we could see two different spins, but because the universe is branched, if the universe branches every time one of those decisions of electrons or quarks is made, then anytime anyone observes one, it could change again. Meaning, anytime you individually observe one, you could be now in a whole nother universe, where everyone else saw that same thing, but you're not really in their universe. The them you were with before in time is in a different universe having seen something else, with a different copy of you who saw that same thing. So that's just... It's been 19 minutes. I told you I could talk about this for ages. I could still say more. We're running out of time, though. So we'll finish this level, and then maybe we'll gather up these last 4. But I love quantum physics, because there's so many theories, and it's so weird how quantum physics works. Because basically all the normal rules of science go out the window and everything breaks. Things are suddenly based on randomness, which, like, the universe is based on randomness suddenly, which we thought was impossible. We thought everything 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 has a position. We can calculate mass, we can calculate velocity, we know where a particle will be if it's shot at a certain direction at a certain speed. But if we calculate everything perfectly, and we shot it in a direction at a certain speed, but we let it go for long enough, so we're talking about like light years of space, would it actually not end up where we expected it? Because would it actually end up in a different spot because the slight gravity of that randomly shifting electron moved it further than we expected? Because is it so random we couldn't have calculated that? In a long distance experiments, would we not actually be able to properly calculate that? Or can we calculate it, but only if we observe it? And there's all sorts of things, because everything goes out the window, and there's so many weird rules, and so many weird little things, and the light changing from waves to particles, and everything spins acting based on randomness, based on your look, and different possible dimensions, the multiverse theory. There's so many things, and I absolutely love it, because I love it, because it's so confusing, and it's so complex, and it never makes any sense, and that's what I love about it. And I could go on about it for ages. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you think about this stuff. Also, I should say, always, because I make thousands of videos, I've already made over 1,000 videos, and for the rest of my life will continue to make thousands of videos, always when you're responding in the comment, when I ask you a question, please tell me what it was I asked you, because I will never understand what it was otherwise. If you say some random the answer to your question is this, I will not even understand. I don't remember what my question was. Always please tell me the answer to your question of blah 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 is blah 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 blah, because I will not remember the question. Even a week later, I've already recorded like a dozen videos. A week later, I've recorded a dozen videos, asked a dozen questions. I don't remember it a week later. Tell me what the question is, please. Because I so often have to like ask, what did I ask in the first place in a question when I'm like responding to someone giving me the answer. But hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you think. Remember to tell me exactly what you're responding to, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.